Yeah, and I thought, as mentioned, and as you can perhaps see from the title of this meetup, that I'd begin with what I call the story of the six spheres, which is one storyline among many that I feel are available for us to get a sense of spherical thinking, grasp it, and wrap our minds around that. And it is in some ways a continuation of the first one we did. Although I would rather, I mean, I'm going to have them all close, you know, and this is here just in case we want to remember what the dance of the Tao looked like. But today I'd like to go sphere by sphere, given that we've already sort of come to a place where I hope those who are present get the sense that if I, for instance, show you these two spheres and bring them together, that we could now look only at the connection between them as the line of connection, the finger pointing between the two hearts of these spheres. When it, and as every finger points both ways, that is a connection that goes two ways. And so the you know, when I try to explain to people, tell them the stories, again, this is really more of a storytelling than a lesson. I'm not a teacher, I'm just here to present something that everyone can take a good look at and take to their heart and perhaps find resonance with that. So as you know, I've explained in the last one, let me just recap that anyways. The idea of what a sphere is within synergetics or spherical thinking can be reduced to saying a sphere is a body of a membrane, at minimum a membrane of other systems, other spheres. We're not looking into that too deep now. It's a membrane that is binding as a boundary an inside to an outside, making a whole, because the whole is the whole, not just one side of or the other. And by doing so, manifesting a center of gravity in the heart of the sphere. So that's a little more vague even than Bucky's definition of a sphere. He would say that a sphere is a system where the members of the membrane are approximately the same distance from an approximate common center. Lots of approximation in there, because nature, universe does not like to be limited to that kind of precision of it has to be perfect. Nobody is perfect in the universe. Yeah, so with that as a common ground to say this is the minimum that we want to identify in a system to be able to say it's a sphere, let's draw the attention to the connections. So I've got here for the means of this presentation, I've got this little ball bearing. It's a little steel ball, high frequency sphere, so high that we can't look through the eyes anymore unless we use radio grammetry or whatever they call them, crystallography. They can still shine a light through the holes, through the eyes, but it's gonna be a tiny light. So I've got two of those, and I'm going to connect them with this here straw with magnets in them, right? So that is the way to say, now we've got two spheres connected, right? And this is the same system as with the two oranges. It's just that in this case, the size of the spheres in this is as big as this finger is long in terms of a diameter. All right, so I recognize that we cannot quite see the entire sphere right now, because we've reduced it to more or less the center of gravity and the relationship, but the sphere is that big nevertheless. This is very much a presence in the system. Whether we tune into the connection or into the sphere itself, that's the kind of fluidity we get out of synergetics. And, you know, with this I already kind of skipped the fact that a single sphere on its own could not be aware, as Bucky was great to point out. So in Bucky's sense, life comes down to awareness, and awareness implies otherness, because without otherness there's no awareness, and without awareness there's no oneness, you know. So to be one self implies and complements one another. So yeah, we've got now our two spheres connected, and so far this is really just going back through what we went through before with the other explanation. I've got now a pair of spheres. They are another set that is a whole, because they have a common center of gravity in between them where I can balance this. And we cannot say anything else about their relationship other than it's a linear relationship, which is to say a lot, because a linear relationship, contrary to conventional belief, is not going to infinity. It's not a division. It's very much a definite connection between two. And whether it's a long line or a short line, it's probably not a straight line, because other than in the perfect mind of the Greek geometer, there is no straightness that we could experimentally find in universe in that way. Because something that is really truly as straight as we get is a high tension system. Like if I take a string and pull it tight, then it gets straight. But the string itself is still going in a wave. It's still gonna have that. So keep that in mind. No perfection needed, no straightness here. But nevertheless, we have a compendence. This is not a interdependent system, but a compendent system. They both hang together rather than off one another. All right, that's a lot of saying stuff about a very small thing. So let's add to that and get yet another sphere into the mix. And since these are magnets, I'm going to follow their liking rather than forcing them together the other way. And now we get to this, which is a system of three, but it's not balanced. It's not completely connected yet. It's allowing for freedom now of movement, because these spheres can basically roll around one another freely. But we do find that this is a system out of balance insofar as there is the one that connects to two, and those two don't connect up with one another. And I guess this is as good a time as any to bring this up, but this was when you had the meetup on the geometry of the drama with Doug. There came up this question between Richard and Doug of how it could be that the triangle, as stated in the presentation, was considered such an unstable system in terms of a social constellation. And I think it really comes down to this, that this kind of constellation is not necessarily a stable one, because there is no connection between all members yet. This can be a very, very violent one indeed. And the one, on one hand, the one in the middle is very much, defined by the other two, because on these ends of the connections, I have full control over the angle in the middle. But at the same time, the one has, it's in a place where it can also direct the other two where they don't know about one another. Yes, so that's, I think, the distinction between the more or less dramatic kind of constellation of three and an actual triangulation. Because if we do add the third connection here, which bridges our two outsiders of that other connection, we do get a triangle, you know, another whole system with its center of gravity in the middle. This being a system that can hold shape, which is, you know, it is structure. This is structure. Structure is triangle. And it does hold the shape by being a fulcrum on one hand, where at the ends of the levers where I have least effort, I get a third member who holds this link in place, and vice versa. We go all around. So this is essentially the simplemost circle, full circle. And if I did actually take spheres, as in this case, I can show you that they are still able to move because they can turn in or out, like an involution or evolution, like this one here. So the triangle is still able to move, but it's also able to hold actively its shape. That's a very special, very, very special condition. And it is a plane, no surface. That's why I call this an eye, because I can look through. And the triangle offers for the first time an in-between, not inside and outside yet, but I can look through from the same side to the same side, you know, one side and another. We're going to come back to that when we look into time. All right, and we know that this is a plane because every tripod that we set down sits on the ground, and it's not going to rock and walk away. It can tip over, but it's not going to rock because it's got three legs, and therefore, however uneven the ground, it comes with its own plane of existence. All right, that's the triangle. I hope I said everything I want to say about that. And you know, this is a reiteration. I've told this story many a times, but every time it's different, and that's for the better. So let's add a fourth sphere, and for the moment, this is going to be a repetition of the steps before, because for now we have again just that kind of linear relationship with a free angle between these. Then we do have that one meet yet another sphere, touch that, and we get to the pair of eyes, which is where polyformity really first appears, because we realize that a single eye, when it unfolds, is already going two ways, complementing one another. And it is very much still moving, you know. It's actually not as stable as I wanted it to be, because the magnets have run into the depth of the straws a little too far, so they don't get as much hold of the ball bearings, but it's fine. Still, you can see how this is like a hinge, like a book fly. It can take off like a bird. So when that happens, we have two planes, and now we get our last connection in place, and we get full circle to a sphere again, because we get the first sphere of spheres, the four eyes, where we have inside and outside bound together by a membrane, membered by, in this case, four spheres, and they create their common center of gravity in the middle. This is, you know, in synergetics, the quantum. It's the unit of volume and the minimum system, because really in synergetics terms, a system is equivalent to a body. It's something that has inside and outside, which is funny because I've been calling this thing a system all along the way, but really now it's a full system, whole system again. And mind you, its identity is not just its inside, but its universe. universe defined by this system, by this membrane, because the membrane is binding the entire inside to the entire outside, and only the whole thing is the whole thing. All right, so lots of synergies along the way, lots of wholenesses that we integrate and bring together. And this is as far as we took it, I think, on the first round. So let me show you what comes now, because this is only 4 out of 6 spheres. All right. And now is the part where we learn another lesson about what synergy is, and we get to meet a quantum leap. But little by little, one by one. Let's add one more sphere. So far, so good. It's, again, the same kind of setup. We first get that free to move kind of linear relationship with an angle in terms of the relationship to the other connections, but nothing else. It's nothing new that we haven't seen yet. So we add yet another connection. Let's see this one, and we get another situation as with the pair of eyes. So we have an edge-bound eye now, so to speak. You know, I call these edges fingers. I said that before. So I guess it's a finger-bound finger-bound eye. Still nothing new. Let's add another one. And with that, we get something interesting, because we get, again, a stable system where everyone is connected. And this is basically one way of having a pair of 4 eyes. We could call it the 6 eyes, because it's 6 eyes on the outside, but it's also 6 around 1, because there's a shared eye on the inside. And this is 5 spheres so far, yeah? And looking at this, I guess it's more or less a rhetorical question to ask, what is the volume of this? Because if we just said that the purple part is a volume of 1, then this is quite clearly a volume of 2. I hope that is as clear as I hope it is to everyone. All right, so that's the 6 eyes. Now let's get to 6 spheres and add the 6th sphere. And again, we repeat our kind of dance that we had before. First, that single connection, the linear one, growing up into another eye that can blink, perhaps. And then when that meets with the 3rd finger, a 3rd sphere, we get again to a very interesting configuration, which looks like this. I don't know if you can hear that in the background. That's my neighbor. She's having fun. Aha, yeah, there you go, Richard. So this is one 4 eyes removed from what Richard was showing. This is what Bucky called the 3 tetra arc. It's kind of like an arc, I mean, sort of. It's bent. It's 3 4 eyes, hence 3 tetra. It is, I think, the more relevant embodiment of a volume 3 quanta, because we could, you know, if you can recall what I told last time on the nature of the box, the so-called cube. Here's the yellow one, if you can remember that. The volume of the minimum cube that we can embody with this kind of creation stuff that I'm doing here is also volume 3. You know, that's something, but in my eyes, given the relevance of 3 in general and in Fibonacci in particular, I find this a very interesting case, that this is a volume 3. And it is also the seed crystal, so to speak, for a helix that can grow out of this, which is called the tetrahelix for obvious reasons. And I'm going to see if I can fetch a good example of that one that shows the four eyes a little more clear than the small one that I had in mind, or in my sight. No, I don't know where it is. All right, I'm going to show you the small one. You're not going to be able necessarily to see how this is the same kind of structure, because this brings in a whole different level of frequency play, and we haven't yet really looked into frequency to begin with. But this is a tetrahelix. It's just to the uninitiated eye, it looks not like tetrahedron or tetra-eyes, tetrops. Four eyes, I call them. Not like those at all, but it is. This is a helix of rock crystal and amethyst four eyes. Anyways, I'm taking the round tour here because we have reached 6 spheres, yes. And we have gotten to this. Another way to call it, if we were to count the eyes, on the outside of it, there's 8 eyes. And that might ring a bell, 8 eyes. If we did count the shared inside eyes, it would be 10 already. So I guess it's 8 around 2, perhaps. But this is where I can show you what a quantum leap looks like when we look into synergetics. Because if we counted the numbers of spheres, it's 6, half a dozen. The number of fingers is a dozen. And with that, we could already grow a different kind of 8 eyes. And in fact, this is almost that. It's just a matter of precession, which brings us to another one of those meetups that I wanted to get back into. There's a lot I wanted to add to your conversation on that later on. But just as a practical example of precession at play, let us see what happens if I take the very central finger here, the one that is currently pointing vertically. What happens, would you think, if I take that out, this one here? Let me turn this a little so you get a better sense of the shape. Okay, now I'm getting you confused again. That's good. So I'm going to take this finger and I'm going to take it out and put it in between these two hearts. Okay, let's see if we can do that all together. Let's disconnect the bottom first. And there it goes. There goes the whole thing. That's what you get with magnets. Okay, I said I wanted to disconnect the bottom. I've got that. I'm going to take out the finger. Just for a second, you see this is the thing without the finger. Now it's not a structure anymore. It's not a closed system. It's not a whole system because it's not omni-triangulated, because one of its eyes is actually four-sided. Not a square, no square here, but it's a four-sided one. So I'm going to balance one tip on my knee and take back that finger, and rather than having it go in the way it was here, now we put it in that way or that way. We'll ask the magnets which way they want, but we bring it in this way, which is, if you follow closely, this is precessional shift by 90 degrees, right? Right angle. And it goes here and it goes there. And now it's a whole system again, which is by now hopefully familiar to you. This is the 8 eyes. And that is a quantum leap. Why? Well, we haven't changed anything about the system in terms of the constituents at all, except for the orientation of one relationship, which we've shifted by means of precession by 90 degrees. But if you recall the volume it had just a second ago, as it was 3 4 eyes connected up, that's a volume 3. However, now the 8 eyes, as we have it here, actually has a volume of 4. So there's a full quantum that just came really out of nowhere. I mean, that's probably nowhere with a K in the beginning, because if you know where it is, it's easy to conjure up. It's not nowhere as in, you know, nobody there. So yeah, I think that is a beautiful way of introducing at least two out of the three foundational or basic, or however we want to call them, the main three sisters of the family of spheres, the 4-eyes, 8-eyes, and dozen 8-eyes. This is two of them, including some weird golden siblings on the way in between, Siamese systems. And now we've got to this place, which I left you with on the last call. Kind of, I was so I wanted to tell you a lot about it, but we had to talk a lot about the boxes first, and then I felt like I couldn't really get into this and left you with too much in too little a time. But to me, this is the shape of balance. This is it's like at the heart of everything. Like it's the Tao in one of its stages, but a very balanced central place. Yeah, so that's what I call the story of the six spheres, and I speak of it being one way of reanimating geometry, because this is all animatter, all animate, nothing dead, nothing lifeless, nothing solid about this. Everybody of these members is still moving, just together as one. And it shows, we could not put this together as a box, and it couldn't hold the box. But we can have it this way, and it's going to be something where we allow for synergy to come in. All right, but that's a lot already, and I think that's where I would like to hold the story for a second and just breathe and have you. Oh wait, before just to see what the structure looks like if we do look at the spheres more closely. This is the same system, 6 spheres, as you can see, and this is also an 8-eyes. This is actually 8-eyes on the outside, and on the inside we would find another set of 8 because the lines go that way. Yeah, and okay, one last thought before we open it up is just, in my sense, when I play with the 8-eyes and with these 6 spheres, I want to kind of shift our sense of the system a little, because conventionally, when people look into the closest they get to these structures through conventional geometry, the platonic solids, as they call them, they call this so-called platonic solid a octahedron, and they like to put it this way. In almost all visualizations of those so-called platonic solids, you'll find this one like that, because then it looks a lot like two pyramids sitting on one another. It looks a lot like lots of squares, really. And it's fine in terms of space-time to have it this way if it's allowed to spin, because then it would be that way. But if it's allowed to come to rest and sit down as it would on the ground, it would sit like this. And that is a different orientation, right? If we do the same with this looks more like 4 plus 2, right? It's the 4 in the hip and the top and the bottom, which are the axis that it's spinning around. And when it does come to rest, oops, it rests like this. And then it doesn't look so much like a square thing anymore, but really like a triangle sitting on a triangle. It's 3 spheres, 3 sitting on 3. And, that's another one of those things I would like to tap into later with regards to the system that Tom Miller was showing, the natural modular, because there's a lot of ways in which that shows the same kind of shift has taken place in his mind, in his understanding of the nature of these structures.